Today I want to talk about something that has not sat well with me since the Assassin's Creed Shadows Reddit AMA last month, and that is regarding the world design of Shadows and whether they were going to make any changes to that in order to make the parkour more accessible. And the answer that they got was about the development of Shadows and how they knew going into Shadows that a lot of the buildings in Japan during that time period that Shadows takes place in were not very vertical. They were all very flat, low, less than 2-story buildings. And they knew that the parkour was not going to accommodate for that level of traversal that we've had in the previous titles where we've had 6- and 7-story buildings like in Unity or AC2. So the devs came at it from the angle of making everything more horizontal instead and having different layers that go under what you would expect. For example, you can dive underwater and use your little snorkel to sneak around. You can also go underneath houses, under the floorboards and sneak around that way. You can hide up in the rafters. There's sort of, well, you can see the theming here. It's all based around stealth. Not so much parkour, but that was their excuse. They said that they compensated for the lack of parkour movement with the amount of stealth options going underground rather than moving upwards. Now, what this does for the parkour means that no matter how many parkour updates we get, and yes, we have had some parkour updates that give us some really good improvements on the way that Norway moves, and it makes the game a lot more fun and accessible to play. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that Shadows' world design is not built for vertical movement because there is barely any buildings in the game that can be traversed in the traditional way that we have with parkour from ACs in the past. If there is a tall building, you have to use your hook in order to traverse up it. There is no natural parkour path. But because the grapple hook is in the game, obviously it serves its purpose of being able to get you up to those higher locations without compromising on the historical accuracy of the way the buildings are designed. And that is basically my main point with this video today, is I want to talk about whether Shadows made the right move even existing in the time period that they chose, because we know that one of the core pillars of Assassin's Creed is the parkour, and so to hear that they were going to go to a setting that doesn't fully incorporate one of the core pillars of the franchise seems a bit like they're shooting themselves in the foot. Why would you go to this era in Japan if you know you couldn't fulfill the parkour that people want? Well, my first point against this is I don't think the devs of Shadows knew how much parkour meant to the community. It seems like it's only in the lead up to release that they finally got the impression that parkour is something that people have been sorely missing from the recent games ever since Assassin's Creed Origins. I mean, you would have thought in 8 years they would have maybe caught on to the fact that people weren't happy, but at least they got it through eventually. Even the Mirage update 2 years ago should have been an indicator that Shadows' parkour was not going to be up to scratch. But at that stage in development, I doubt there was much they could do. They'd already picked the time period that they were going to go for. They knew they were going to have flat buildings, and to be fair to them, they did as much as they physically could. And that is sort of where I'm at with Assassin's Creed Shadows mechanically for the parkour. There are better YouTubers than me that are more accommodated with doing parkour runs and have a higher mechanical skill than I ever could dream of when it comes to the parkour in Assassin's Creed. But for me personally, I feel like we've reached our peak. I don't think there's much more you could do to Shadows to make it very accessible based on the world that you're given. And I know that is the main two arguments. People say one side of it is the world design, the other side of it is the actual mechanical abilities that you're given, like manual jumps and things like that. Now, manual jumps would be a great thing for Shadows, and I know we are going to be getting some free side ejects and stuff like that without having to be locked into a particular path, which is the way Shadows has, well, even Mirage worked very similar, where it's very locked in. You can only side eject to particular locations, you can't just freely side eject. But the thing is, you're still only side ejecting to a building that is about 1 story high, and it's not exactly the perilous heights that we had in Unity. It's very low stakes, and there's only so much you can really do. I mean, when you watch these videos of people doing parkour runs, they're stretching the game to its absolute limits, and you can tell they're doing moves that the devs never even thought of. Now, do I think Assassin's Creed should be restricted to the time periods and locations that they use? Should they only make locations that stick to the fundamentals of the franchise? Do they need to have locations that are good for parkour? No. I think this would limit the franchise. I mean, let's be honest, they've done so many different time periods at this point, they're probably running out. So to limit them even more, I don't think is fair. I think the issue is, as we are moving on with console generations, as the technology is getting better, Ubisoft are probably sitting here thinking, we want to be the most historically accurate depiction of a time period, and that's the advantage that we're going to have over every single franchise on the market at the minute, is the historical aspect. And if we start compromising that vision to give players more accessibility in the traversal, then it's going to take away from that unique selling point. The problem is, you're then making architecture that is so historically accurate that it was never meant to be in a video game or traversed in the way a video game would. And I think that's the issue that's probably running through their minds as they go into games like Hexay, Invictus, and the future, is how do we compromise what players want with, parkour mechanics that fit the time period and allow for a more expressive range of movement. But how do we also incorporate that with the time periods that we want to depict? For example, I was in the car coming home from work today and I just had a thought, what if they did like a cowboy Assassin's Creed game? We've seen some images of that in Black Flag and Rogue. They had some concept art of a cowboy assassin. And then I thought, well, would fans really be happy with that? Now, of course, being set in the Wild Wild West kind of infers that there's not going to be many buildings in the game. You may have the occasional town or settlement, but it's going to be a lot like Shadows. It's going to be a lot like Odyssey and Valhalla, where it's just large stretches of nothing, which, let's be honest, horse gameplay is no replacement for parkour. I don't like the fact that horses have taken over as the main form of traversal. They're not fun. The fact that you have an auto move feature on the horse just tells me that, even you know that the horse riding is boring. So why is it here? Why not design your worlds less realistically, but a little bit smaller, and therefore you can, condense stuff down? Anyway, that's a different point. If you do a cowboy Assassin's Creed game, there's going to be large stretches of absolutely nothing, and you're not going to be able to fulfill what players want with the parkour because there's going to be nowhere to do it. The only compromise to this that I can think of is by making some sort of fictional town that is absolutely massive and has loads of high buildings and churches and stuff, but it could be a designated section where players can do all the parkour stuff in their own area. Because otherwise, if you want to do parkour and you want to do stealth and you want to do combat and you want to do all of the Assassin's Creed sort of normalities, you're going to be stuck if you're doing a cowboy Assassin's Creed. A similar sort of thing would happen if you did a World War II Assassin's Creed. How many tall buildings is there going to be when they're all getting bombed? Now, thankfully, I do think Hexay is going to be a good compromise because we know that that is taking place in a European city or country, who knows the scale of it yet, but we know there's going to be thatch buildings and it's going to be more of a typical European city location, which is where the best Assassin's Creed traversal has been. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we are getting a return to form in the next game, but who knows what it's going to be like going forward. I don't have an answer really for if Shadows should have been set in the location that it was. Personally, what I would have done is compromised. I would have added some fictional towns and cities or something a little bit taller, a couple of multi-story buildings, even some castles that weren't as realistic but were more fun to play, because I think that is where the sort of divide is happening here. Is it more realistic or is it actually fun to play? Because I feel like at the moment we're not synchronizing. We're not getting those two elements together. We've either got these really realistic looking castles and how they were really depicted in Japan, and then we've got how awkward it feels to traverse them, because you're essentially just running along a rooftop the entire time, or you're on the ground. There's no sort of fluctuation between the mobility there, and I feel like you just complete the whole thing either on the roof or on the ground, and then you traverse up the main building instead of being an organic moving around, or even a sort of tomb of sorts where it's laid out. I think even the forts in Assassin's Creed, Black Flag and Rogue, they had set paths and fun traversal to get to the main war room that you were trying to get to. In Shadows, you climb up a ladder on the inside, or you grapple on the outside, and that is pretty much it, and it's not fun because you don't have any control over how you engage with these systems. You just go up. So personally, I think some compromise is needed, but what do you guys think? If you wanted parkour and stealth and combat, are there any settings that you think are totally ruled out completely? Or do you think with some fictional tweaks and additions, they could make it work? Let me know down below. Don't forget to hype the video. That is a new feature that's probably going to date this video because it'll be gone in the next few months. But yeah, there is a new thing in the comments. If you swipe along on the comments, you can hype this video, which will get it pushed up a leaderboard. And I don't know what it does, but it will go a long way to supporting this video. And if you did enjoy, please hit that like button, subscribe for more Assassin's Creed content, and I will see you in the next video.